Welcome back to The Why. I'm Lauren Magarino. Each night we go behind the headlines, bringing you smart perspectives and answers to some of the biggest headlines. Our big question tonight is, why are influencers so influential? Just weeks ago, TikTok stars were invited to a White House briefing via Zoom and were encouraged to use their platforms to share information about the war unfolding in Ukraine. That is just the latest in the White House's efforts to work with TikTok stars. Last year, President Biden sought out online creators to encourage vaccination. To help break down why influencers are so influential to consumers and can help companies drive sales is Dr. Pamela Rutledge. She's a media psychologist with over 20 years in the media and tech world. We're so excited to have you on The Why tonight.
I'm happy to be here.
So I want to just ask it really simply. Why does an influencer posting a photo or video of themselves or a product influence some to buy that item or follow them online?
I think the influencers have been a very interesting phenomena. You know, we've always had celebrity endorsers, people that the audience felt connected to. With influencers, it's even more personal because the nature of social media means you're looking right into the camera. They're not playing a role. They're really connecting with the audience. They're reacting to the things that the audience is like. So the audience starts to feel as if they're a friend or a real acquaintance.
Does that translate into action, though? Like if there's an influencer, which it is, that word of mouth advertising, that you also will see them participate in whatever it is that they're talking about? Or does it really just stop at, I watched it and I'm just taking it in?
No, it goes far beyond what people referred to as slacktivism, right? You know, you just put your like up and then you're done. People do internalize these things. I mean, one of the ways that influencers are very impactful and persuasive is that people start to identify with them and they internalize a lot of those attributes. So yes, those things can carry offline. And it really matters when you're talking about things like vaccinations. The Ukraine war, what it does is it builds a much bigger groundswell for support. So it makes many more people aware, and it starts to craft a larger narrative that can be used for public policy.
Wow. Well, I want to talk about something that's called the halo effect, which is basically people who are considered attractive tend to be rated higher on other positive traits as well. Does that play into influencer marketing?
It plays into everything. I mean, there's a wealth of research on the fact that people who are better looking are perceived as being smarter or more talented or all of those things. But we also tend to be more attracted, right? Hence the word attractive. We like people that are attractive. We assume that they're desirable. So yes, we're drawn to them. That makes them much more persuasive. And it also makes them an aspirational figure. If somebody you think is really attractive, you want to be like them and you want to internalize some of the things that they stand for.
For some influencers that, I mean, really, they're considered famous. What does it do for a consumer or a fan who, you know, really, like as you're describing, has this connection or feels this connection with this person to interact with them online? I mean, what does that do?
Well, it reinforces that relationship. People can develop what's called a parasocial relationship, which is really a one-sided relationship where the audience member or the viewer feels like they really know that person. They really feel like they're a friend. They care about their feelings, and they have this sense of it being reciprocal, even though it's not. So these relationships can form really meaningful roles in people's lives, especially after COVID. With all of this social isolation, influencers and any kind of sort of media character become sort of a social proxy. They allow you to have that kind of sense of connectivity even when you're isolated.
Right. And it's true. I didn't even think about really how the pandemic, which it's really affected so many things, that why wouldn't it affect this? But, you know, that craving for connection. You know, I know that celebrity influencers have been around nearly as long as there have been celebrities. Why are some brands choosing micro or nano influencers, just everyday people versus those big names?
It's because of that relationship. Micro influencers are incredibly powerful because they have such strong connections with their audience. So while a mega TV star, Lady Gaga, might have millions of followers, a micro influencer might have 10,000 followers or 5,000 followers, but they're really devoted. So if she wants to buy something, or if she wears something, or if, she votes in some way, they are much more likely to take action than all of those millions of people following a mega celebrity. So brands have figured out that it's much better to get a small amount of really passionate fans, really passionate followers engaged with your product than it is to try and scattershot, the sort of shotgun approach to marketing.
Right. I mean, and really when you mentioned Lady Gaga, and it's like, of course, she has millions of followers, but it is interesting to see how somebody who has even 10,000 really could elicit a little bit more change when it comes to the marketing side than someone like Lady Gaga, which, really, I'm thinking about the influencer now, because you describe this type of relationship where it's like all these people that you don't actually know, who think they know you, feel connected with you. I mean, how does this feel on the influencer side?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, and one that people are just starting to ask, since we're just essentially at the beginning of this whole influencer trend, is that the influencers have created these relationships by, for the most part, showing their authentic self, by letting people feel like they know who they are. This means that influencer now is going to have a much more difficult time setting boundaries than a traditional celebrity who plays a role or has something very defined in society, whereas an influencer has been showing you everything they're doing all day long. So they have the pressure of delivering content and maintaining that level of authenticity without giving away themselves or feeling the burden of continual content production.
I'll tell you, I mean, I grew up really with the YouTube, influencers and those people who were coming up and starting vlogging. And it was incredible to see over the course of 10 years how most of them stopped creating content because it really was just a lot of pressure and a lot of, when you open yourself up to that level of audience, I mean, the scrutiny that comes in as well online is pretty tough to see. So to that point.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Everyone thinks they want to be famous, right? And it feels really good to get likes and to get that kind of positive feedback. And that's a biological response. That's not any personal failing that you like to have people like you. The trouble is when you're in that role where you've created this public persona, especially as an influencer, when you're really selling yourself, it's very easy for that person to start to over-rely on the external feedback and lose sense of their internal self and their sort of intrinsic motivations and who they are. So that line is very difficult to walk. And I think we're going to see a lot of the sort of young celebrity stories start to manifest across the influencers, the sort of crash and burn because they can't handle that level of pressure. Being an influencer is a lot of work.
It is. It really seems like it. I do have a bottom line question for you that we like to ask all our guests who come on. Younger people are more susceptible to certain things. So what advice do you have for parents whose kids might be really fascinated or intrigued by an influencer online?
Well, first of all, parents need to exhale. I mean, that's always the first rule in dealing with kids and technology is just exhale. The kids are going to know things you don't know. That's okay. What you're bringing to the table is wisdom and maturity and a set of values that you want to impart. So start that conversation with a conversation, listening to why do you like that person? Let me see that person. Do a little research. Follow the people that your kids seem to be engaged with or that they really admire so that you can have meaningful conversations. What you don't want to do is say, oh, that's just so silly. You're just shoving a balloon underwater. It will come up somewhere, but you won't know where. You want to keep those conversations open so that any questions that come up, you can have a meaningful conversation with. There are so many teaching opportunities, especially since the influencers are all over the news, right? There's stories all the time.
Right.
Well, what do you think about that? What would you have done under those circumstances? All those kinds of questions that you can ask as a parent that aren't, as aggressive as, well, why? I don't know why you want to do that. This sort of typical parental response.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Dr. Pamela Rutledge, thank you so much for your insight and for joining The Why.
My pleasure anytime.
As you